Yo, let's go. All right. I'm locked in to this. I have to be honest with myself about just how preoccupied I am about this election. So, shout out to Red Eagle Politics. I don't know who you're following tonight, but I appreciate him. I appreciate people that can be kind of level-headed. He's clearly passionate about what's going on here. So we'll check in. We'll kind of go back and forth. I've got some stuff that we want to discuss that's, again, it's sort of a broader thing than just the election, as we tend to do. So thank you for being with me. If you're hanging out, let me know how you're doing. I want to make sure we are good to go. So if you're hanging out, let me know in the chat if the volume is all right. And we'll just check in here for a second.
But it's not by enough to dictate the state margin. Trump is still, Fulton got a little bit bluer, but the red areas are just through the roof. And that's kind of what the pull of the state is. Even in some of these places like Pickens County, where they hit a record turnout level, Trump gained percentage wise. So Henry County's not in. What was Henry County's margin for, it was 20 points. So, yeah, it's 20,000 votes. That's not enough for her, for the record.
Yeah.
Because, it is true. Fulton and Cobb, they're pretty much all coming in. Most of them are in. It's not a done deal in Georgia, but it's unlikely at this point that I think he loses it, given what's left. North Carolina, again, Mecklenburg, did it come in? More of it came in. Durham County came in. Orange County's in.
One of the things that I thought of as I'm listening to these guys, as I'm kind of paying attention, is there's been a bit of a conversation already about the got something in my eye, sort of the presence of podcasting and things. Of course, Joe Rogan, JD Vance, and forgive me, the guy from Pennsylvania all went on Joe Rogan this cycle. Gosh, what's his name? I'm spacing out here. It's just too early to be spacing out. So thanks for hanging there. I'm going to just double check, unless somebody can give me a sound check. I'm going to double check myself here in a second.
Cycle. I
think that's loud enough. You guys let me know. Again, I've still been kind of fussing around with the settings. Again, of course, as soon as I start kind of talking, my throat starts to, I think it's allergies. I have a tendency to be have a little bit of a vocal fry, but I'll try not to be too self-conscious about it. I know I bring it up a lot, but that's part of the reason why I fudge with the settings and stuff like that. And so I've been hearing that my audio is low compared to what we're hearing
when the first
on the
returns
so
came in. Resto says needle for.
I think that's good. Excuse me while I get a little bit of a drink. But one of the things I was noticing about this is within this conversation, within this political cycle, you have something that's emerging that we've talked about on this podcast, which is the presence of dialogue, the presence of what would you call it? Yeah, the force of dialogue, the force of open conversation, and the fact that some of these media companies for a long time have sort of owned the airwaves, and they no longer own the airwaves. They were talking about it a little bit with was Elon Musk buying Twitter enough of a sort of just an alternate? I don't know where you stand with Twitter and all that other stuff, but it was this time last year, it was Facebook suppressing a news story that nobody could get out, nobody could share it. And we're not seeing that, or we shouldn't see as much of that this time around, because someone like Elon Musk, who's committed to free speech, owns Twitter. And so my thought was these sort of alternate broadcasts need to just call states. I mean, of course, you've got the Decision Desk, you've got New York Times. A lot of people are going to go off of this stuff, but see, that's what's so, well, maybe I need to refresh some of that. But anyway, it's just of course you've got these, but a lot of these guys are still waiting on the legacy media to call these elections. And I don't think that's, I just think that they should step into their cultural moment, their moment of history, and say, we're going to do our own analysis. We're going to call or not call based off of what we see. We're not going to wait for CNN to call it for us. And so I posted this. I thought, I think this is right. Let me see. What did I say? Yeah, we just need more. Oh, gosh. X, why are you doing this? So Luke Taylor, shout out to Luke. Thanks for being here. At least on X. Yeah, the Daily Wire isn't calling it, but maybe the Blaze is. I haven't actually looked at the Blaze. Hey Jordan, what's up? Trump 2024. So we got one. Okay, if this is a benchmark, if this live stream is a benchmark, all right, there you go. One vote for Trump at least. Yeah, thanks for being here. I know there's a lot of chatter out there. So if you find this live stream, I usually just live stream on Tuesday nights, sometimes on Wednesdays, depending on my family schedule, my work schedule. But usually Tuesday nights is a live stream night for me. So I didn't see any reason to change that or postpone it, even though admittedly I'm a little preoccupied. I'm an American. So this feels very much like a historic election season that it's good to pay attention to what's going on. It's good to be here and to be able to tell your story. Yeah, I just think we need more of this. If these alternate media sources actually just claim the authority that they have with people, at least they have trust. And I think we're in a market. We're shifting from an attention market to a trust market. I think that's what we're seeing with podcasts. That's what we're seeing with alternate news sources. I mean, X has become one of the places for people to find their news, and people trust that. And so you have to just sort of say, okay, there's maybe a reason for that, and step into that role. So it was just interesting. I noticed that with the Daily Wire. I'll go through some of these posts that I have. I've got an interesting theory about this Barack Obama post with this Disclosure TV post, but we'll get there when we get there. We'll get there when we get there. I actually don't want to get too wrapped up in it too much. I want to kind of see where things are, kind of like settle in a little bit. And then I want to just encourage us to have, again, a more broad understanding of what's going on. And one of the things that I explore on the podcast is sort of it's something I borrow from Plato's Republic, and that is that the city is the soul writ large. And if you can think of a nation like America in a way, the way the city-states were, you can see what's going on in America and then kind of diagnose the soul of a nation, diagnose what's going on in individuals. So the city is the soul writ large. The soul, you sort of have a heart, mind, and spirit. It's not uncommon to talk about the American spirit or something like that. But I think what we will see in the next, 24 hours in the next week is the condition of the soul of this nation, and where we might be going. I think that there as much as I'll just for the sake of this live stream, since it's going to be mingled a lot with politics and how I do think that theology and politics are mixed. I think that politics is downstream of theology. What comes into my mind when I think about God is going to influence who I vote for ultimately. And even if I'm not voting for Jesus, right? Like Jesus is the guy I would vote for as a Christian person. He is the guy. And he's not on the ballot per se, right? He's not on the ballot. And Donald Trump is not Jesus. Kamala Harris is not Jesus. They're going to fail that test, right? And so, Upcycle, what is up? Hey, are you paying attention to this election over here in America? How much does that hit the scale out there in your neck of the woods? But yeah, we were just talking about how sometimes these things can be something to help us diagnose the soul. So I might just leave it on Red Eagle if you guys don't mind. A little bit of if that's not distracting you, I'll just leave it on there, and then we'll check in with his audio here in a second. That way, because I'm just going to monologue here for a second as I get my thoughts straight. 95H source. This isn't just, 210 Trump already? Oh, is that the prediction? Huh, interesting. We'll see. And then what does that mean? Does that mean that we at the collective, we are like, if that's true, and let's say tonight, sort of there's this overwhelming support for Donald Trump or this other party, is that the American people saying, probably with the globe, like, we're not going to just let you take our freedom. Like, that's not how this works. Like, we're not just going to be like, man, I guess we'll just trust the oligarchs or the tyrants and they can rescue us. I think that has been the hope of some that are in power. They're hoping to gain more power through stuff like this. And I think in 2020, everybody was in chaos and confusion. Now, I'm kind of doing this a little bit backwards. I want to get to, we're 30,000 feet here. So part of that 30,000 foot view is what's the soul of humanity. And then the other part of it is, for me, it's sort of this idea of exiles in Babylon, but I'll get to the exiles in Babylon piece here in a second. This was so funny. I'm just going to play this because you can't, what we're seeing right here is the fact that you cannot reason with a mob. The mob does not think. The mob has and when I say mob, I mean just the stadium full of people. They are swayed pretty easily, and there are political figures who count on that persuasion of the mob to lead people towards whatever end they desire. And we just see that. We see that so perfectly here. There's this group of people, and they can't change their chant, right? They've learned one chant. They've just learned one chant. That's all they know, and they can't change it. And Kamala tries to change it, but they can't. And what that shows you is that, like, there are people who are gonna follow the tyrant, whatever the tyrant says, let's say. And this was the point that Socrates was making in his Apology, that the poets and the playwrights could sway the mob. I don't have my channel pulled up, but I did this one of the last podcast videos that I did. The poets and the playwrights could sway the mob, and the philosopher can sway the individual. And I find that interesting because when Jesus comes on the scene, he has the power to do both. He can reach the individual exactly where they are because he's God and he has infinite capacity to meet each individual just as they are. We have a great high priest who's not unfamiliar with our suffering, but is like us, right? So he can understand each individual, but as God, he can also sort of understand the whole. And so one sort of political test would be, does your party or does your group, does your tribe manifest sort of a unity within diversity? Or are they a monad? Now, I haven't made this video, like a monad, meaning they're a collective group, but they're like a Borg. And they all do the same thing. This is Tower of Babel talk, right? They all spoke with the same words. And I've done this before. Sorry, I know I keep bringing this up, but they use the same language and the same words, right? So that's the monad. That is a political party or whatever it might be, a tribe that just says, conscribe to this. And you cannot shift from what the Borg tells you. Now, America, that's not the spirit of America. That's not where America was founded, where we are kind of a unity in diversity, but you have to tolerate the other. Now, I think that's the other thing that Jesus does well, that we would like to emulate. Tolerate that who is the outsider, and so you have the. So I see this, again, I'm sort of suspending my. I have sort of philosophical immunity here as I do this political live stream on a theology channel. So I hope you're just giving me grace there. So thank you for that. I realize that my channel is dedicated to theology and I'm being very political tonight. So thank you for giving me that. And Thank you, Upcycle. Thank you. Just amazing. Sending support from the other side of the world to you. I love it, man. I love it. Speaking of unity and diversity, right? Ups is really on the other side. And in a beautiful part of the world. And I had the chance, and I remember, I don't want to give out too much of your personal information, but in the area of sort of the Mediterranean, I was there for a while. I was in Turkey, I was in Athens in 2004. I don't know if I ever shared that with you, Ups, but I was in Athens for the 2004 Summer Olympics, and what a beautiful place. And I just remember being struck by how much history is there. Coming from America, our history, it seems like we don't go as far back. Maybe we do, but I just loved it. So thank you so much. And I love that there is this unity of diversity, that we can connect from the other side of the globe. And I think it's the Spirit of God that connects us. And so thank you for just your generosity and what you do. And with that, again, there's a political test that we can do. There's a political test. And the test is, are you part of the Borg, where everybody can only think one thing, like Tower of Babel? Or are you a part of a community, which I would say the church is this, a community created by the Spirit that allows for unity and diversity? We can welcome in the other. Are we perfect at it? No. But we can welcome in the other. We can have discourse. We don't have to be ideologically committed. So I'll give you, I'll just sort of give you the thing. In the end, I'm not going to lose myself over this election tonight. I'm very focused on it. I have a strong desire to see my country sort of heal and grow and mature. But ultimately, I'm a citizen of a kingdom that is not of this world. And so I think there's a way in which the church can be that unity and diversity, sort of let your light shine type of thing. But here you see the mob in full force. They know one chant, but you can't get them to chant anything else.
Thank you. Let's vote. Let's get out the 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 vote. Let's win.
She tries so hard to move the mob, the attention of this mob, and she can. And a lot of people are pointing out that this is just sort of cringe and, let's dunk on Kamala. She can't. But if the group is just Kamala, what were they chanting? Kamala.
Thank you. Let's vote. Let's get out.
Kamala. And then it's let's vote. Oh wait, no, you've completely changed the rhythm here. And then she's like, let's get out the vote. And it's like, oh, that's too much, right? And then it's just like, you can't sway the mob. And you can only tell them, here's where you stand here, you chant this. And there was, and again, that was the one where they were chanting her name. She seems to feel maybe a little bit of insecurity there with a bunch of people chanting her name. And so there was another part where she says, okay, now you chant your name. And everybody kind of goes, Bob? It doesn't work, because this is the mob. This is the crowd. And is this election, is this going to be a response by a people who do not want to be put in that Borg? We're not interested. This is America. We are founded under this idea of sort of freedom and liberty and sort of small government, even in some ways, or whatever. And in the last election cycle, it was a test to say, how much can you take? How much can we make this group of people go? And you scare the bejeepers out of everybody by saying, if you go outside, you're gonna die or whatever. Like, and we don't need to rehash that. It's probably like post-traumatic stress. But is that something that says, okay, I guess maybe I'll put that to you guys. Where are we? Are we the people that say, oh man, I don't want to get sick. So yeah, sure, I'll stay inside and I'll mask and I'll do whatever. But a lot of people stop short of getting an injection and getting medical intervention. They say, well, hold on. That's where they kind of stopped, right? That was the, you can push me, you can push me kind of far, but you can't push me that far. And so now, you sort of go through 4 years of whatever the result of that is. And you kind of go, no, man, like we need something. And maybe like, and I don't know, again, what you guys think about this, but I tweeted out, this is 1776. It's probably not, but like, is there something new about this movement this season for America? I don't know, but it does feel that way. And of course, like, let me see if I can find this, but talking about unity and diversity, one of the things that does kind of, I don't know, I guess maybe put me at ease would be a good way of saying it, is, I'm not, what would I say? All right. So when you have a home team, you're called a homer, right? So like if my home team growing up was the Oakland A's and the San Francisco Giants. And so, of course, you always want to see the Giants win or the A's win. And so you become a homer, and all the bad calls that, go against your team were bad, but all the bad calls that go against your opponent, those were good, right? And so I don't want to be I'm not a homer for Trump, right? I'm not really a homer for Trump. I think that we live in Babylon, and I think that there are certain policies and certain issues that I simply, as a Christian person, I cannot vote for those things. But can I rationalize it enough to say, well, I'm not voting for those things. I'm not voting for the ideal. Ideally, we're in the kingdom of God, but neither party is that. So I'll vote for the thing that moves the needle from what I know I can't live with towards more of that ideal. It's sort of moving the needle. And I think essentially that's what I did. Let me see. This was a funny post somebody put out about, sort of Trump getting getting his crew together. What was it called? It was just Trump, and it was like the Avengers. But it's really interesting that he's doing this, right? He's pulling in Tulsi Gabbard. He's pulling in, what did they call? What would they call? Like, maybe it was like Save America Team or something like that. I don't remember what it was, but let's see if I can find it. It is, again, not being a homer for Trump, but realizing, okay, there's something to this, right? That there's this group of people who are at least willing to work with him. He's willing to work with them. I think it's actually kind of interesting that Ron Paul was kind of a late add to this idea. Of course, Tulsi Gabbard, a Democrat, RFK, a Democrat, Vivek is a conservative. Both Vivek and Trump are businessmen, so they're used to spending their own money, not just whatever, tax money you could get. And I think there's something to that, right? I have to be sort of a little bit more fiscally conservative. If I'm spending my own money, it hurts more to spend it. But when you're just spending other people's money, it's just, we can just buy all kinds of stuff. So anyway, the RFK piece to this, the Ron Paul piece to this, the Tulsi Gabbard piece to this was really interesting to me. Those are all people that seemed, at least from what I know of them, to be sensible human beings, even though they're sort of part of even though Ron Paul is sort of he's an independent, which I prefer. I'm not a Democrat. And so like Tulsi and RFK, it's like, there's this, and I do have a clip for that. It's really funny that, another kind of barometer, I guess you could say, another thing that would be the test for the soul of the nation and where we are is, it definitely seems like there is deception coming more so from one side than the other. And I would say that's sort of Kamala and her camp, because they'll say one thing but do another. they're saying, there was a news report that came out that said, we're really afraid of the violence that might be caused by Trump supporters if he doesn't win. And so they're calling the National Guard. That's what it was. I can probably find the post. But they're calling the National Guard. But where are they deploying the National Guard to? It's all blue states. So you're telling me you're afraid of what Trump supporters might do. So you're deploying the National Guard to the blue states. Actually, it was Timcast pointed this out. It was on this Timcast episode. So I don't have that part benchmarked, but that was the idea, which again is a little bit of a barometer for how we're doing. So that's maybe the introduction, and then I want to listen to a little clip here. Maybe I should have asked Matt before I used his sermon, but I just thought this was good. Matt Ballard, a pastor, and just talking to his congregation. And I think we need this. I think this would be the other thing. What is the soul of the nation? And where are we at? So I want to listen to some of this. It's again, this is more Babel talk. How do we, if you're a Christian person, how do you live like an exile in Babylon? And so hopefully this is encouraging. And again, it sort of helps us to not get too fixated on some of this, which I'll admit I'm kind of fixated on, and see the big picture. So I'm trying to stay kind of more in big picture arena, and so hopefully that's helpful. Again, we'll kind of we'll go back and forth and kind of look at the results and see where we're at. But yeah, this will be the sort of the discourse that I want to have. So thank you for being here. If that's the kind of thing that you want to talk about too, let's listen in for a second.
We get into there, I just want to say a few words pastorally as we are on the precipice of a Tuesday that is a significant election, and it comes at a time where our country seems especially fractured. And so I don't have anything particularly profound to say. I don't have anything that you've not heard me say before, so these are just reminders, okay? Is this election significant? Yes. All elections are significant. This one is really significant, it seems like. I don't know. I'm not a social scientist. Is this election the be all and end all? No. I don't think it is. I think a lot of people would have you believe that. And so as Christians, let me say a few things. Number one is, it's fine to be passionately politically minded. That's no problem at all.
I appreciate that. It's okay to be passionately and politically minded. I also think that, I'm picking up on something here, which is, there is this kind of fear mongering. We have to be careful of this. Perfect love casts out all fear. Like, I think that fear can be a tool for manipulation. And I think that that's one of the reasons why Christians historically have been a threat to tyranny, because the biggest thing that tyrants will use, the biggest power that tyrants will use is sort of that threat of death or harm or whatever it might be. And so, again, a lot of people would have you think that this is the most important. It is an important election, but it's not the be all and end all. And as Christians, it's okay. You should be civically minded. I mean, again, what comes into our minds when we think about God is the most important thing about us. And as Christians, we think of God as the creator of all life, including human life, which he created in his image. So all human life, all politics, which is sort of the science of how we get along, how do people live life together, is influenced by that. So I think maybe one of the reasons, again, a lot of people would make this point, is that one of the reasons countries start to fall apart is because Christians maybe become disengaged. They say, because if you've ever heard this, let me know. You're so heavenly minded, you're no earthly good, right? You're so heavenly minded, you're no earthly good. I don't really agree with that. I think that the more heavenly minded we are, the more earthly good we should do. Because at least for me, from Scripture, I don't see the two as being sort of diametrically opposed to each other, except in the context of worldliness. The Bible does talk to us about that, and that would be like rebellion to God. But God made this world and loves this world. And prior to the fall, well, prior to, sort of Adam being alone was the first thing that God said, this isn't really good. This isn't the way it's supposed to be. Up until that point, everything was good. This is good. This is good. This is good. This is good. And he created us to live in community with one another. And so politics is kind of the science of human community. So I don't know. Let me know what you guys think about that. But I appreciate hearing a pastor say, it's okay. It's okay if you're kind of like revved up about this. It means you care. It means you care about your country or your neighbors, and that's a good thing.
But it's also important to recognize that within your passion, you realize that the line between idolatry and passion can be real thin sometimes. I'll also say that the Bible says, render unto God what is God and unto Caesar what is Caesar's. That means tax money, but it also means civic responsibility. I think Christians have a civic responsibility to vote. Vote your conscience. Vote your conscience, okay? I'm not going to tell you who to vote for. But I'm going to remind you of this as believers. As believers, we are aiming at transformation. That's what we're after. And as believers, we also recognize that ultimate transformation does not happen in a ballot box. Ultimate transformation comes as someone is transformed by the gospel.
And that's what I was saying is like, yeah, is it hard to vote for certain candidates or certain parties or certain issues? Yeah, it's difficult, but we're sort of moving the needle, we knowing that true reform happens when people come into contact with the person of Jesus. The Timcast, this episode of Timcast, which was from last night, if we have time, we'll get to this clip because I thought that they had a really good conversation about abortion, and ultimately, they come down to the fact, and I think it is true that you can't really legislate this. This is an issue of the heart, so that's where it goes, and at least there are certain political forces that are trying to move the needle around the issue of abortion so that we as a nation can have more robust and meaningful conversation about it. And that in that conversation is where you spread the good news, is where you spread the gospel, the hope that I think can transform people's hearts and minds on issues that are difficult to navigate.
That's why Paul says, I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God for salvation of those who believe, both for the Jew and the Gentile. And so as we approach this, we recognize that though ballots are important, they're not nearly as profound or important as you taking the gospel to people that you live, work, and play with. The other thing I want to say is just a reminder that the paradigm that we as believers should embrace as we walk into an election or just being patriotic citizens, the paradigm we should embrace is that of being in exile. The best story is probably that of Daniel in the Old Testament. When Daniel was a little boy, a nation called Babylon came and conquered Israel. And the Babylonians, the way they would do this is they would conquer a territory and they would get the children of the rulers of the land and they would bring them back to Babylon. They would indoctrinate them in the ways of Babylon, and then they would send them back to rule as vice regents of the Babylonian king. And so what they wanted to do was to change their fundamental identity from Israelites to Babylonians. Well, what we know is that Daniel and the other people like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, is that they never totally accommodated to the Babylonian culture. Now, while they were in Babylon, they worked for the good of Babylon. They served, Daniel served as a high official, not only in the Babylonian administration of King Nebuchadnezzar, but when Persia came and conquered Babylon, the Persian king Artaxerxes saw Daniel's fidelity to work for the good of Babylon and had him in his administration as well. So two very different political parties. The heart of Daniel was always, I am an Israelite, I belong in Israel, I am in exile, my fundamental identity while in exile, is not that of a Babylonian. It is that of an Israelite. Yet while I'm in exile, I will work for the good of Babylon.
And how can you do this, right? And I think of Joseph as well in Egypt. And you do that, again, not compromising necessarily your, what what God has called you to be. But you work for the good of Babylon, right? You work for the good of Babylon. And because of that, you start to transform hearts and minds, right? Joseph in Egypt, I mean, they looked at him and they were like, gosh, who is this God that you serve? Who is this? And God, when he was establishing Israel, it's funny because he sort of is still conversant with the culture around them, and kind of says, in a way, God is not necessarily giving the law arbitrarily. He's looking at the culture of the Canaanites and saying, don't do this. Don't be like this. Be a different people, a set apart people. You're going to be my people, so you're going to be set apart. You're going to be in this land, but you're going to be set apart. And so, yeah, that takes me to another really fun question, which I haven't really dug too deep on the podcast. But what is Israel? Who is Israel? And I think sometimes we don't quite know how to answer that, but maybe that's another podcast for another time. But I do appreciate this encouragement from Matt, and again, just the perspective of being that exile in sort of Babylon and wondering, again, how do you work for the good of a nation? What do you do? I think, it's funny. I'm watching these guys do their podcasts and I'm thinking, gosh, I feel the same sort of passion about just speaking, right? About just saying what I think, about being part of the conversation. And is that something that's helping to move the needle? Is that deception is hard? It's harder to deceive people. Again, going back to the idea of the Borg, the mob, and the community. The difference between the Borg is they all think the same thing, they all say the same language, as in Babel, right? But the community can get together to discuss an issue, and then if there is deception, someone has been deceived, or maybe they just don't quite get it, in the midst of dialogue, truth sort of filters out the deception. And I think for a long time, maybe there was a lot of deception that was maintained by people. And yet now with everybody being a podcaster, right? Everybody's a TV host now. You can't really do that as much. Everybody's a on the street journalist, everybody can report what's really going on. And so now it's a community discussion. And the only people that aren't part of that discussion are the people who cannot switch the way they chant. Kamala. She's trying to switch it to get out the vote, and it just doesn't work because they're too myopic, right? They're the Cyclops in the cave who can only see one thing at a time. What is happening, Miss McGillicuddy? Thank you for being here. Again, I know there's a lot of live streams going on. One of the balancing things, even though, like I was just saying, I have a passion to be a part of the conversation, and this is really cool. This is happening, that we're all sort of part of this. Maybe it's more like a community than the Borg. I also don't want to contribute to the noise, and so. Again, I don't know. I usually live stream for about an hour. I've got a ton of stuff rattling around in my head about the election and about JD Vance on Joe Rogan. And actually, you know what? Let me play a clip from Joe Rogan, because I thought this is to the point of what I was just saying, which is, let me find it. oops. Joe was gonna have Kamala on the podcast, right? Do you remember this? And I have a clip here that's called "Sacred Conversations with Joe Rogan."
Well, I heard you.
And it'll give you a clue. I want to do a actual podcast video on this here in the future, but are we a community? Is what's going on? So we're sort of saving the free spirit of America because everybody now can contribute to the conversation. And in 2020, there was collusion. I mean, they show that there was collusion between social media networks and the government to sway the conversation, to make it one conversation. Again, the Cyclops, the monad, the Kamala chant. They can't chant something else, right? The Tower of Babel. They're all using the same words. Again, we're trying to diagnose the soul here, and so and the spirit is part of the soul, and so that's a certain spirit that only allows you to see one thing, say one thing, respond in a certain way. But there's another spirit that says, actually, I want to be a part of a conversation. I don't want to be in an echo chamber. I don't want to be stuck in I want to be a part of a conversation rather than an echo chamber. And so listen to Joe talk about what he was going to have Kamala Harris on. Yeah, the Hegelian dialect. That's a very good analogy. Thesis, antithesis, synthesis, right? Now, there's a critique that I could give of the Hegelian dialectic, which is where on the line between thesis and antithesis do you create a synthesis? And that opens things up to sort of an arbitrary outlook, but we'll hold the criticism of Hegel here for a second. But yes, you're exactly right. I mean, there is this sort of, essentially it's the dialogos, right? That's what it is. And again, the more dialogue we can have, the more we become a filter for deception, or a filter for truth, meaning truth will be the thing that rises to the surface and deception gets sort of pushed to the side. And it just doesn't, you're not convincing people anymore because your deception just doesn't, it can't endure the scrutiny of the community when the community is focused on truth and freedom, let's say. If the community is just focused on ideological commitment to Kamala, then when she tries to shift the chant, they don't know what to do. They short circuit because the mob cannot critically think. It's the community that can participate in dialogos. It's the community that participates in that. So again, I teased this, but let's go ahead and listen to Joe kind of explain what, in a sense, what I'm hearing, let me know what you think, is Joe has a sense that dialogue is sacred. That's what I get from this.
Well, I heard you might have needed to cancel on us to get Kamala Harris on.
I was not going to do that. I would have had to. I knew you guys flew from England, and I wasn't going to cancel on you because she had an opportunity to come in. You could look at this and you could say, "Oh, you're being a diva," but she had an opportunity to come here when she was in Texas, and I literally gave them an open invitation. I said, "Anytime." I said, "If she's done at 10 o'clock, we'll come back here at 10 o'clock." I go, "I'll do it at 9 in the morning. I'll do it at 10 p.m. I'll do it at midnight. If she's up. She wants to, drink a Red Bull, can party on."
Yeah, but I think this idea that you're being a diva is silly because you're offering her the opportunity to do exactly what the other candidate did, right?
Well, she actually reached out when she found out that he was coming on. So their camp reached out to me. So I said, "Great, I would love to talk to her." But it was very difficult to tie it down, and they wanted to travel. And see, the thing is, like, you can't, if I go somewhere, then there's going to be other people in the room. And they want to control a lot of things, I'm sure. That's a distraction. People in the room, like, my whole goal with her and with him was just talk, have a conversation like a human being. You find out things about people. You get a sense of them, at least, a real sense. That was it. I don't give a what we talk about. I really don't. I just want to talk to you. Who the are you?
Do you think they think that you're on his side and they're more wary of you?
I don't know. I mean,
well, of course, Joe infamously came out last night and endorsed Donald Trump, which is just kind of fascinating. it's kind of fascinating the way he did it. I'll find the post, but yeah, Joe endorsed him. So he, I guess, is kind of on Donald Trump's side at this point. But he's certainly on the side of wanting to have a good conversation with people, uninterrupted, unmolested by other influences.
Just because of my appearance, there's always been this assumption that I'm some right-wing MAGA guy. I was a Bernie supporter. You know, I am I'm a politically homeless person for sure. You know, I always considered myself a left-wing person. I never thought I would ever vote right-wing. But then the tides of culture shifted in a very bizarre way. And it just made me, over time, much more aware of what this stuff is really all about. Because what this stuff is really all about is just these natural human behavior patterns and these tribal instincts that we have. And it overpowers all discussions. It overpowers what's good for the collective group. It overpowers everything. It's just people pick a fucking team, and then whatever that team says, they can do no harm. They will do their best to marginalize the horrible effects of the furthest extreme version of that, whether it's Antifa or the Proud Boys. They'll minimalize the... It's the same thing, man. And so for me, it was always like the liberals were the ones who wanted education and open-mindedness. The liberals who were the ones with the ACLU let the Nazis talk and let them have a rally. They said you can't infringe on people's free speech, because if you infringe on the speech of people that you disagree with, you're being a fucking hypocrite. You got it. The only solution to bad speech is better speech. We've always known that. But when they had the power over social media and these collective groups of people that all had the same ideology, and then that tribal mentality kicks in, and you lose the perspective that you should have as an educated person that recognizes that everyone has to be able to talk, and we have to figure out who's right. And you might be wrong. You might be wrong. And you might be clinging to this idea that you're right, and you're going to do the whole thing a terrible disservice.
And that's why I think the good podcasters will endure. I think. Because they're committed to that process that Joe is talking about. He doesn't want people to influence the conversation. He doesn't want somebody feeding Kamala the party lines. This part, just here's what, again, that's myopia. That's the ideological sort of echo chamber, or whatever you want to say, that doesn't allow you to engage in just regular conversation. They're not interested in conversation. And that's another test, because deception is, what's the word? What's a good word? This creates deception. Right? I'm in a group of people. They're all chanting this thing. We must be right. It's much harder. It's harder to engage in dialogue like this. It's harder to sit down with Joe Rogan for 3 hours and be honest with him about what he thinks. And I thought that J.D. Vance's interview was great. I have that one as well. I was going to play a clip from it, and again, I'll do a longer. I'll do a. I'll do an actual treatment of it, as Paul Vanderklay would say. I thought their conversation was great. They're talking about this woke religion, but it's not new. What do you guys think? It's not really new. When you look at what woke is, honestly, it seems a lot like Babylon. It seems a lot like Babel. That's kind of that's kind of what it is. The mind control programming, repetition. Do it this way, do this. And again, you see it. It's such a funny illustration, but you see it. They cannot switch. They short circuit when she tries to switch the chant. And again, a lot of people are dunking on Kamala because it was a cringe moment for her. But more for me is, does it help me diagnose the soul of the city, right? This is what's happening. We're diagnosing the soul of humanity here. And that moment, more so than anything, kind of shows you there's going to be a group that really wants you to fall in line and just repeat the chant. And then there's another group, like, they might be okay with open dialogue, open conversation. Wow, that's a lot of J.D. Vance and not a lot of Joe. Yeah. There's this other group that believes that conversation is sacred, that says, no, if it's my podcast, it happens in my studio and without your cronies telling you what to say. It's just two people sitting down and having a conversation. That's what it is. Trump did it. Vance did it. And the guy that I can't think of his name from Pennsylvania. Gosh darn it. Help me out. I just had it. John, who's the senator from Pennsylvania? Big guy, had a stroke, bald head. I listened to a little bit of the podcast, but it was hard to listen to. John Fetterman sat down with Joe Rogan. I mean, yeah. Definitely props to Fetterman. I probably don't want to agree with his politics, but at least he shows up to Joe Rogan. So, what do we want to do? Do we want to check in on this? This seems kind of. Let's listen to what Mr. Red Eagle again. I'm gonna try to balance things. Let's listen to what Mr. Red Eagle says, and I'll go ahead and again shout out. I think he's a passionate person. He's definitely a conservative. That's the link to his channel if you guys are interested. Definitely, if you're looking for something to watch later on tonight, I would recommend his stream. Again, he's going to come at it from a conservative perspective, but I think in some ways that kind of
probably going to go blue.
Appreciate,
but
at least a level-headed conservative perspective on that, and not just a homer. Right? That's the other deal. You want to stay away from the homers.
It's kind of drunk right now. I guess they're testing. No pun intended, but tester. Yeah, what's going on here? It's just a mess. Okay, that could dictate the Senate. But Bernie Moreno, they might have to call that soon because that would mean Republicans take the Senate. Casey's still leading in Pennsylvania.
Okay, so he's on the Senate stuff. Where are we even? Nope, that's not what I wanted to do. Hey, I will say though, I got a free trial of YouTube Premium, so I shouldn't get any ads.
Came back down to reality a little bit, but still a very good margin for Trump right now. We'll see if that's going to hold up in his favor in Wisconsin. He still leads in Greene County. He's leading in Sauk County by 8. He leads in Door County by 5. We don't have any counties all the way in, but look at Iowa. I mean, folks, Ann Selzer, what are you doing? I mean, these are all these red shifts in Iowa. And Donald Trump has taken the lead. You know what? We're going to call it. Donald Trump will carry the state of Iowa. It's 6 electoral votes. Ann Selzer, your career is done and it's over. So,
see, I like that. Yeah, don't wait for the legacy media to call it. You call it. You do the analysis. And then if you're totally bonkers, people aren't going to listen to you, right? And you're gonna fade off. Your channel's going to be naturally is going to sort of diminish. But if you're right and you build trust, then you're going to succeed. And I don't understand why some of these algorithms don't understand that. It's like, let people succeed. Don't try to push a narrative. And people will tell you who's successful for the most part. I mean, we're still falling. Again, I haven't delivered. I haven't delivered on the title and the thumbnail. I'm not passing. I am not passing the Grim Grizz test. I am not passing. This was actually back when we were listening to Matt Ballard. He was talking about being exiles in Babylon. That was my clue to say, you know what? This is the unconditional election stream, so let's talk briefly about what is unconditional election. Now, am I talking about this kind of election? We hope it's sort of unconditional. We hope that it's just is what it is, right? We hope that truth wills out. See, they have Pennsylvania shifting now. They had it leaning Harris, and now they have it shifted over to Trump. I wonder, did Red Eagle... Where is he? Did he point that out yet? He probably has, and I was too busy yapping. But that's I think that would be game over, right? That would be game over. What is it? 20? Is it 20 in PA? If he's got North Carolina, if he gets Georgia, it looks like he's got North Carolina. Gosh, Virginia is so stinking close, man. They called it for Harris, actually, and Trump was actually technically ahead. So we'll see if that... Oh, yeah. Yeah. Sorry, there is a little bit of a delay. So, Jess, I just got your message. Thank you. Yeah, there's a bit of a stream delay, and there's like essentially it's a safety switch. If something were to happen, during a live stream that I don't want to air publicly, I can shut down the live stream before it actually airs. And so it gives me, I think it's about 10 seconds. I actually want to shut it. I want to narrow it, but I haven't figured out how to do that. So I don't know. Anyway, PA would be game over. Oh, what? Now it's back. Maybe I was freaking out. Maybe for a second I thought it was back to blue, but I guess it's not. This would be Georgia and Pennsylvania, I think, would be game over, right? Gosh, they've got Maine. Just interesting times. Now I don't know what I was talking about before that. Right. Unconditional election. Are we talking about this kind of election? Are we talking about this kind of unconditional, uncontested election? Not quite. But it does give us confidence, right? Because the idea of unconditional election comes from, and I'm not, this is Calvin's tulip, total depravity. Because of total depravity, we have unconditional election. Total depravity just means, like the human fall was total. It affects the whole person. In fact, it affects all of creation. There's not like a partial fall. It's not that there's something redeemable in you, and therefore God has pity on you and then redeems you. It's just we were dead in our sins and transgressions, but for God. God then rescues us, and that's where we get unconditional election. Now, why does this help me? This kind of helps me because, and this is from Legionnaire Ministries. They're good about stuff like this. Why would I be thinking about unconditional election the night of the presidential election? And that is because I ultimately believe God is sovereign and in control. God has this thing figured out. He foresaw this moment, and he has prepared us for such a time as this. And so even if my desire is for a certain candidate to be elected, who I think would give us a more healthy country, not a perfect country by any means, but a healthier. Even if my candidate, quote air quotes there, doesn't get elected, then it's okay. We're okay. It's not the end. There's something bigger going on. There's a bigger story. And the God who is in control of that story is one who we can trust. I'm going to listen to Red Eagle really quick and then see if my wife wants to come hang out with me while I
had this feeling that it's not going to be a cakewalk for Brown, and it might not be. He only leads by 3. I think he might hold on to it, but I think that we can make a major projection as well out of the state of Ohio, and maybe in a little while, because that is another important projection. Let's look at the House, by the way. Republicans are doing well in a lot of these districts in New York. Ryan McKenzie's ahead of Susan Wild. People laughed at that prediction that I made, but it seems like that could hold if that's true. We'll see. It's not done yet. But when you have Trump on the ballot driving turnout, that definitely is huge, and it definitely gives you a massive boost overall. And they've kind of slowed down the counting in South Texas. Let's check the county map in South Texas, because this is huge. Donald Trump in Texas, he leads it by Romney margins, 13 points. This is absurd. We don't have some of these counties like fully in yet. That's true, but it's like Dallas County. He really ran it up in Tarrant and all these places. Like the Sun Belt is looking very good for Donald Trump. Even Pima County in the early vote, he's at 37. Harris has a lead, but it's not going to hold. We don't have Yuma in, Gila in. Mojave is like, That's a beatdown right there. But Kansas, Trump now leads. He's going to take the lead by more than 10. Colorado, Trump trails by 12. Illinois is an 11-point race. He's at 31% in Cook County. He's doing relatively well in some of these suburban places. People are upset. People are angry at the status quo, and that's what happens. That's really what happens. You see this shift. You can't ignore the fundamentals. The race is not over. But North Carolina, Georgia likely are. Arizona lean are. Probably you could make the case for likely, given how we know the votes are going to come in. Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania all leaning towards Trump.
So that's a good point right there. And again, we're listening to a guy who focuses on stats. No worries. I love you, babe. If you're listening to the live stream, thank you. I appreciate you. And no worries. You can distract me anytime. Here's a guy. He's just, like I said, he's conservative. I don't know what his religious background is, but he's able to sort of diagnose the nature of the soul of the city as well. He's saying people are fed up with the status quo, and that would be my take. That would be my take on this. Now, we could get to some shenanigans here. I can post some conspiracy theories. Maybe get this video flagged or something like that. But and by the way, I did start my famous air conditioner, so if that's too loud, sorry. But it's infamous, at least in my own world. It is it would be, this would be my take. It would be, if this takes place and if legal votes are counted and everything, there's election integrity and all that, it would be, and Trump comes out as the victor, you would say that this is a response to the status quo. And that was another thing during this campaign that I just didn't understand. What's up, Matthew Parlato? How's it going? I hope you guys are doing good, man. I hope you guys are feeling okay, regardless of what happens here in America. Again, we live as exiles in Babylon, man. And what's so cool, I mean, I don't know what to do with, Matt's point here was, you still work for the good of Babylon, because those are people, right? Those are people still made in God's image. And though they are in rebellion to God, how else am I going to let my light shine unless I in some way cohabitate with them and create community with them? If I just sit over here and go, no, I'm not going to, you guys are all pagans and I can't, you're not going to be super successful. You're not going to be able to serve at the right hand of the king and influence the nation like Joseph did, and in fact save a nation eventually, because he was trusted by the Pharaoh. I don't know, man. There's something to that, in the sense that even we as Christians can fall victim to this type of Borg mentality, and yet we deal in the realm of theology, which is beautiful, and we cannot exhaust that subject. So we have to be a little flexible with our with maybe how quick we are to lash out against a pagan nation and say, and of course we would, I don't know, what do I do with this? Like, judgment is ultimately, it's ultimately for the Lord, because I think sometimes when I stand up and I cast judgment, even on things that I see, would be clearly in Scripture, like against Scripture, can I trust that I'm doing it in a way that still glorifies God? Now, he's going to do it in a way that brings him glory. I can trust him, but can I trust myself to be an accurate representation of who he is? Would I, like Jesus, go to the woman caught in adultery and say, I don't judge you, but go and sin no more? Would I be again an accurate reflection of who he is? I think sometimes, unfortunately, the church is susceptible to this type of myopia as well. And so, man, there's a tension there of living in Babylon and working for the good of the nations, working for the good of the people, because they're still people made in God's image. And so, man, where do we want to go from there, friends? I don't know if I want to get into conspiracy theories. They do seem like they're priming the pump for, you know, and we live in a world where none of these elections go without being contested. They just are. But you have Barack Obama's post. It may take several days to count every ballot. You know, it's like, really? Why? When Florida's already done. That's a huge state. There's a huge state. They're done. They were done a long time ago. They're done. Why would it? Why would it? Who would benefit from it taking days and days and days to count? And then did you see this? And I don't know if this is even true. I hope this isn't true. United States to test a hypersonic nuclear missile tonight, just hours after the election polls close, according to Daily Mail. I hope this isn't true. Because it's like, oh man, we lost all these records. Sorry, guys. I guess we just have to choose. I guess we just have to pick for you. We who know better will just pick for you. I don't think that's going to happen, but it's just that's a thought experiment. That's a thought experiment. Okay. I think this conversation over at Timcast was really good. I don't know. Let me see if there's a point of this conversation that I think is really, really good. And then if I can find it, maybe we'll close with kind of a what would be like an encouragement. But now I got to find my time marker.
I consider myself traditionally pro-choice. I think abortion is wrong, but I think it's increasingly difficult to legislate properly. I don't know that I have the best answers, and I will stress with this disclaimer, this issue is the razor's edge. There's no middle road.
Yeah, so, okay, again, we're trying to keep a 30,000-foot view. Abortion is a very politically charged issue, but I think there's a clue there. Because it's such a divisive issue, it's also one of those issues that would help us to judge this. What's the condition of our soul as a nation? You know, where are we as a nation? Excuse me.
I'm not smart enough to come up with a good answer, to be completely honest. I just don't know. What I can tell you is I do believe over a long period of time, the end result will be the complete abolition of abortion. And I mean that from a position of logic. That is, the 14th Amendment would have to be overturned, removed from the Constitution, or the Supreme Court has no choice but to follow its natural conclusion. That is, the unborn have the same rights under the Constitution, and every abortion would require a court adjudication with justification for the death of an individual. And I will stress this by reading Section 1 of the 14th.
Okay. He's going to talk about the difference between when does somebody become a person. I did a whole lot podcast on this because one of the points that I don't think gets made enough is you don't really know when life begins. I mean, you could say the cells are alive. That's fine. But is it a person? Is it a human life? And the truth is we don't know. Like, we don't know when human life begins. It's something of a mystery. And what I propose is, but even if it's a possibility that it's a human life, even if it's possible, then we have to do everything in our power to protect that human life. Again, what comes into my mind? Theology. Everything is downstream of theology. If I believe that God created all this, and I believe he created human beings in his image, then I need to do everything I can to preserve the sanctity of that human life. Even if I don't know when human life begins, it is possible that human life begins at conception. Therefore, I do everything I can to protect that human life. I just don't hear that enough, or at least I don't hear it sort of talked about in that way. But I think Tim is spot on here.
All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. Period. Now you can forget about that sentence because that's only one portion of this amendment. Because often the left and liberals try to say, aha, but it says persons born. Only for that sentence. It then says next, no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, semicolon, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protections of the laws. First, outside of the abortion question, this has already been ruled that non-citizens, tourists, illegal immigrants still have the same protections.
That's a good point. And why do they have the same protections? Because they are persons. They might not be citizens of America, but if you're on American soil, then this law governs what, at least how we treat others, right? That's really interesting.
That is, someone who comes here because they're visiting family cannot just be locked up without charge or trial. There has to be, they have free speech, they have these things. This means if the Supreme Court is to answer this question, are the unborn persons or citizens? The argument is, well, they're not born, so they're not citizens, but are they persons? At which point, scientifically, life begins at conception. I believe that the logic follows. If and I've asked this to many liberals. I've asked them, 2 women, 9 months pregnant.
Okay, before we get in, his analogy is pretty good. And again, I have to kind of interrupt, and I know it's sort of hard to listen to, but for the sake of fair use. So before he does present a really interesting thought experiment here. One thing that I want to point out though too is, Tim, he would call himself a deist. I forget this guy's name, but I think he might be. I'm not going to try to remember, but all of the people in this panel have slightly different views. Again, we're looking for unity amidst diversity. What can bring you together? Now, I would say probably everybody on this panel leans more conservative, but they're not part of that sort of echo chamber. They're not part of the Borg that we're talking about, or at least this would be something that sort of allows us to resist falling into the Borg on some level on an issue that's very difficult to have meaningful. It's not difficult to have meaningful conversation, but maybe productive conversation because people feel so strongly about this issue.
They both conceived at the exact same moments. They're twins, and they're married to twin brothers. The babies are identical. One woman gives birth. The other woman is still pregnant. An hour later, can the woman who is still pregnant abort that baby? And the response from the left is yes. Without question, it's her choice. Despite the fact that babies are identical, and the only thing separating them is the body of the mother, I then said, can you terminate the life of the baby that was born? The answer is no. Well, there's nothing legal or logical in that can be concluded. I believe that if the Supreme Court takes up this question, there is only one answer, and it's the unborn are person. At the very least, the argument is post-viability, but I believe whether you want it to be or not, and this is not me making an opinion argument, or I should say it's not my opinion or morals on the question of abortion, it is my view of how the Supreme Court will rule based on the 14th Amendment.
So,
okay. There's another thing at play here, which is, and I think Francis Schaeffer points this out in his work, How Should We Then Live? I featured Schaeffer on the podcast a few times, but it's probably time to pull up a quote from him, which is the possibility of a judicial tyranny. Now, Schaeffer was writing about judicial tyranny post Roe v. Wade. So, and it was bad. It was bad jurisprudence, case law, whatever you want to call it. It was bad. And even people that were advocates for abortion were like, Roe, it's probably going to get overturned at some point because it was just bad. And I'm not enough of a legal scholar to know anything about that. I just know that that's what people have said, even people that advocate for it. But Schaeffer was writing from that moment. And it was like, it does feel tyrannical. Because here you have this law that's not really great, that sort of gives license to just terminate what is, I would say life begins at conception, but even if you're not a Christian like I am, you could say that it's possible that life begins at conception, and you're being awfully cavalier with this, right? And so Schaeffer was looking at that judicial tyranny from the other side. Now we're sort of post Roe v. Wade, and it's like, oh, it's kind of nice that the judges sort of came down and ruled about. But there's something about the sort of lower court judges that we need to be paying attention to when it comes to this. So not just Supreme Court. Yes, think about the Supreme Court and where this is going to be figured out. But also, now that it's a state's issue, look at how the lower courts are going to deal with this. Because then the question is, can you actually legislate this type of morality? And eventually this conversation, I think they they do get there. And there's a particular quote I want to find.
Oh, I would agree with you that that's certainly the most logical choice. But I'm actually going to combine a thing Jeremy said and a thing Mary said, which I think are both accurate, which is firstly, the Republican Party did for a very long time run on abortion as an issue that they were never actually interested in doing anything about. It's not to say there weren't Republican politicians whose heart was in the right place and planned to. It's just for many of them, it was something that could be easily exploited. And then Mary, you pointed out that abortion is necessary for the sexual licentiousness that dominates our culture to continue to flourish. And there's a phrase I like to use for this. These people, they really genuinely are lobotomized by their libido. They will go along with any insane policy prescription, including killing babies, if it means that they get to continue fooling around. There's actually a theory in anthropology that one of the ways you can determine whether a place is a brothel is whether there are infant skeletons nearby. Whoa. Yes.
Yeah, behind
because
every
it's
brothel
necessary.
Is a graveyard. Mm-hmm.
Yes, because it's absolutely necessary in order to continue this absurd fantasy that you can have a quote unquote sexual liberation that does not involve human beings living by the rules and laws of logic, settling down with one person, having a child with them, getting married, which is the most reasonable thing to do. Because we want to talk about sexual liberation. You are not free if you are not living in accordance with reason.
This is why I'm saying I don't have as much faith in the American people coming to the decision that we will not support this if it means partial birth or late term abortion. They will not decide that. They have, I think, collectively decided this is the price for my sexual license. We will shed blood for our orgasm. Like, that is what they have collectively decided.
They've decided that today.
Exactly.
But
Yeah. And is it in some ways, it's like, I don't expect people living in Babylon to act like they're not living in Babylon, right? I don't expect sort of like the pagan world to somehow find a Christian morality to live by. And so within that, you have this sort of breakdown of what human sexuality is. And the fact that it should be this, it is a beautiful thing. And I have a request to do more on this topic, and I'll see if I feel bold enough to jump into sort of biblical sexuality, which I think is ultimately the most beautiful and full picture of human sexuality that we have. And in our current state, it is this unfortunate that people think of it as just sex, right? It's just reduced down to just the physical, this is going to sound gross, but in my mind, like the way people talk, the way the world, and I mean that like in the sense of worldliness and in rebellion to God, the way the world talks about sex really sounds like group masturbation. That's really all it is. It's like there's no real other commitment here. It's just two bodies sort of rubbing up against each other. And then it's like, goodbye, no strings attached, that type of thing. And that's just not, you're depriving yourself of what could be true and good and beautiful. And the fact that the result is beautiful, life. You are a creator of life. You're a co-creator of life. That is something that's being robbed. That is also something that I think we need to talk about more. It's like you're going to have people discarding human life, and they'll justify it, and they'll say, oh, it's just a clump of cells or whatever. But the reason they're able to do that is that they don't see life as beautiful. So again, that's a heart issue. That's ultimately a heart issue that needs transformation to go back to what Matt Ballard was saying. We ultimately believe in transformation. That's what we believe in. Is this important? Is this map important? Is it important where these things? Yes, it is. It is important. And I think it's going to tell us something about the state of our country moving forward. But ultimately, we believe in transformation. And if something like abortion is an issue, then giving people a proper view of human sexuality and the fact that it creates life and that those things are beautiful, I think is the way to win people over and say, yeah, to mangle this is not, I don't want to do that. I don't want to rob myself of what could be a beautiful sexuality, and I don't want to rob myself of the ability to co-create life with the creator of all things. That's pretty cool. I think we should advocate for that, you know?
But it took this is the sad truth for my pro-life friends. It took 70 years to overturn Roe v. Wade. And we had no idea, as I said, we had no idea what we were going to do next. It's going to take at least a generation and maybe 2 generations to defeat abortion now that it's a political issue. It's going to have to be won culturally. It's going to have to be fought for politically. It's going to have to be thought through by a new generation of thinkers who aren't just thinking about how to use the courts to accomplish this one piece of the victory, but who are actually thinking about ways to legislate our way toward victory. Is going to be fought by the churches who have, American evangelicalism is in complete collapse right now. It's going to have to refine, we're going to have to refine that footing. It's going to be probably solved in part technologically, because you're never going to have a society. I hate to say this, but, you know, all of sin and falls short of the glory of God. I said it before. That's the line I came up with on the drive over. I think that I'll trademark it. But, you know, the fact of the matter is that people don't just give up licentiousness, and you're never going to have a society that's free from licentiousness. But you are going to have a society where the age of viability moves back further and further and further and further with technological and medical advances. And the combination of all of that, I do believe, will ultimately, and God's grace, will ultimately result in the abolition of abortion. But it's not going to be decided like at the 2024 ballot box. That's not going to happen. It's not going to be determined in 2028. It's not going to be determined in 2032. We're going to have to fight and fight. We're going to win ground and lose ground. We're going to compromise and get blood on our hands. We're going to dislike ourselves because we have to engage in political compromise for the first time. And Republicans have never had to engage in political compromise on the issue of abortion because it's never been political. We could afford to be completely absolutist in our approach. I'm an absolutist in the ethic. I believe that abortion should be 100% banned in absolutely all instances. That's about as pro-life as you can get. 100% absolute abolitionist. But we're going to have to make political compromise. If I, for example, lived in California.
Okay. Sorry, I don't know when to interrupt Jeremy. He's making really good points. But again, I have to be mindful of fair use. And he does seem to be a person who strings together a lot of his points. But man, there you go. That's it. That's, in a sense, sort of a rallying cry is this, again, to try to bring it full circle. This is this barometer for the soul, and ultimately, it's stages. It's moving the needle. It's not like this is not ultimately the end all be all. Where this election map goes is not the end all and be all. Now, I will say something to the point that freedom of speech needs to be upheld so that we can have the community, so that we can be centered around a central topic, openly discussing it in a meaningful way. We do need, so that is a political issue. Freedom of speech is a political issue. And I think, again, we have, Elon Musk, who seems to be an advocate for free speech. In 2020, there was a lot of crackdown on that. And I think we suffered from it. But ultimately, the ballot box is only part of the conversation. And the other part of the conversation is what Jeremy has just said, is this is going to have to be won in the churches. It's going to have to be won culturally. It's going to have to be won because smart people, people of peace, people of love, engage in the conversation in a way that represents reality. And again, going back to corresponding to truth, right? And that truth correspondence will rise to the surface and hopefully persuade the hearts and the minds of people. That's what I think is going to happen. Again, we're using Roe v. Wade, we're using abortion as an example, and a very important example, but you could extrapolate that into almost every political idea that's out there. I think this is a sense of where those ideas are going, but again, not the end all and be all. And so thank you for hanging in there again on a night when there's a lot of chatter out there. hopefully this is encouraging to you. If you're catching it later on after the live stream, thank you. And thank you again to Upcycle. Thank you again for your donation and your generosity, man, to keep stuff like this going. Little podcasts like my own up and running. And man, I will catch you guys in the next one. I'm gonna take a second. Yeah, I guess I'm out an hour and a half. So I guess I'll just have a hard out. I was gonna play my tunes, but we're just gonna call it for the night. And again, shout out to Red Eagle Politics. Catch his broadcast for the rest of the night if you wanna. I would recommend his. There's others. Sorry I didn't get to all these other ones, but such is life. Such is life. Yeah, I'll catch you guys in the next one.